the weaver of Lydian wool in the gentle hills of ancient Lydia, nestled between olive groves and dusty footpaths. There once lived a woman known more for her weaving than for any legend she would become. Her name was Arachne, and though you may recognize the shadow of her tale as told in myths and fables, her true story begins not with gods and curses, but with the fine, stubborn patience required to spin wool from sheep in the modest town of Hypipa, where the sun warmed the tiled rooftops and vendors sold honeyed figs under patchwork awnings. The art of weaving was neither novel nor sacred. It was work slow, repetitive, necessary. Every home had a loom, every mother knew how to twist flax, and every daughter had hands that bore the calluses of thread, pulled too tightly over too many seasons. And yet, among them, Arachne's hands worked with such unnatural grace that even passing merchants would stop and marvel at her tapestries. She was born to Idmon, a humble dyer of purple cloth, whose stained fingers were a mark of his trade. He used the rare murex shell to extract the deep purples favored by nobles and priests, and his success allowed the family a modest comfort. Idmon's shop, with its clay vats and drying lines strung with lengths of violet wool, was the first place Arachne learned to see color. Not just as something to wear, but as something to shape. The locals whispered that her skill was a gift from Athena herself. After all, wasn't the goddess the patron of crafts? But Arachne, headstrong even as a child, rejected such thoughts. "My skill," she once told an old widow at the dye market, "comes from practice, not prayer." It was a bold thing to say in a world where every crack of thunder was still taken as divine commentary. By her teenage years, Arachne had become known in the surrounding villages. People would travel for hours simply to watch her fingers move across the loom, her shuttle a blur, her weft so tight and precise that it looked like painted silk. But her greatest fame came not from technique alone. It was her subject matter, Arachne's. Tapestries told stories, not just of heroes and triumphs, but of gods behaving badly. In one, she depicted Zeus disguised as a swan, seducing Leda. In another, Dionysus was shown drunk and stumbling, spilling wine into the sea. These weren't just bold, they were dangerous. Yet people gathered to see them. They laughed quietly, whispered nervously, and kept coming back. What made Arachne different wasn't just her talent, but her refusal to defer to the gods. Where others offered thanks to Athena before weaving, Arachne offered nothing but her own name. It wasn't that she disbelieved in the gods, only that she believed more in the loom beneath her fingers. Despite warnings from her father and murmurs from temple priests, Arachne remained defiant. When a group of women complimented her talent and said Athena must have taught her, Arachne corrected them aloud. "Athena did not teach me. No one did. I taught myself," and so, over time, the air around her began to shift. Admiration became unease. Reverence for her work curdled into gossip. Could anyone truly be that skilled without divine aid? And if not, was it possible she was challenging the gods themselves? It's worth remembering that in the world of ancient Greece, gods were not distant abstractions. They were intimate and present, prone to jealousy, sensitive to insult, and forever watching. One did not merely boast, especially not about being better than a goddess. Arachne knew this. And yet, she continued. Her tapestries grew bolder. In one, she wove the story of Europa being abducted by Zeus in the form of a bull, rendered with stunning detail, the girl's fear plain in her eyes. In another, she embroidered Hera's face twisted in jealous rage, cursing Io into a cow. These images didn't just question the dignity of the gods. They mocked it. Word of Arachne's defiance spread far beyond Lydia. Travelers whispered of her weavings to priests, to nobles, even to oracles. And eventually, the story reached the ears of Athena herself. One can only imagine what the goddess must have felt. Perhaps curiosity at first, perhaps insult. Athena, though often considered wise, was also proud. Her favor was not granted lightly, and her wrath, when provoked, was legendary. And so, As the myth later says, she descended to Earth disguised as an old woman. But before that day, before the challenge that would turn her into a creature of silk and shadow, Arachne still believed in the strength of her own skill. She still rose each day before the sun, washed her face with cold water from a ceramic basin, and returned to her loom. She still sorted her threads by color and weight, still wound her bobbins by hand, still sat with her father as he stirred the purple dye, both of them stained by their own labors. What might she have been thinking in those final days before the goddess arrived? Did she feel the weight of her boldness? Did she begin to wonder if perhaps she had gone too far? Or did she still believe, as so many craftsmen do, that the work itself was enough? We may never know the answers, but one thing is clear: Arachne's story began not with pride nor punishment, but with the daily repetition of a thread passed through fingers again and again, until even the gods took notice. And it makes one wonder, in a world governed by myth and fate, how often did immortals' skill alone threaten the pride of Olympus? Threads of pride, echoes of Olympus. The soft creaking of a loom echoes again and again through the sun-dappled workshop of Arachne, a name now whispered not just in her quiet town, but in the halls of nearby villages, and though she didn't know it yet, rumored in realms far beyond mortal comprehension. Her hands moved with an instinctive rhythm. No longer did she follow the patterns of her late mother, nor the conservative symbols approved by temple weavers. Now she charted her own motifs: vines that coiled too wildly, horses with knowing eyes, a shepherd etched in melancholy, as if longing for something beyond sheep and hills. Arachne's fame was growing. But more than that, so was her boldness. The townspeople began to gather in greater numbers outside her humble weaving hut, not to mock her, as they had when she was younger, but to watch and to murmur. You could hear it in the market stalls, among fishmongers and fig vendors. She's better than any temple spinner, better than the priestesses, better than— someone would pause before daring to say it. Even Athena, maybe in ancient Greece, this was not a statement said lightly. Athena, goddess of wisdom, of strategic war and household crafts, had long been considered the divine patron of weaving. Her myths were woven into the very walls of civic buildings, painted onto amphorae, chiseled into friezes. She was credited with teaching humankind the art of spinning flax, of dyeing wool, of keeping order through the domestic loom. Spinning was her divine right. To challenge that was not merely hubris, it was sacrilege. But Arachne wasn't concerned with gods. She lived in a world where the worst punishment she knew was a ruined harvest or a moldy loaf of bread. The gods were tales told at festival time, songs sung at weddings, icons carved into temple corners. Not real, not in the way calluses on her fingers were real, or the snags of coarse wool, or the ache in her back after a day's work at the loom. So when the rumors began, soft at first, about how her tapestries were more lifelike than anything blessed by Athena, Arachne didn't shy away. She didn't deny it. In fact, when asked, she leaned into the compliment. "I've taught myself," she'd say. "My talent is my own." It was a simple statement, but in ancient Greece, where every skill and harvest was attributed to a deity's favor, that sentiment sent shivers through even the most skeptical villagers. One autumn afternoon, while the cicadas buzzed like dull knives in the trees, an old woman wandered into Arachne's shop. She wore a simple gray robe and carried a walking stick carved with owls. Curious perhaps, but not unusual for a traveling elder. "I've heard of your work," the old woman said. Her voice was brittle but layered, like parchment pressed too long. "In a sacred text. They say no one spins finer thread than you." Arachne nodded without much humility. "The gods gave me nothing. My skill is mine." The woman's brow furrowed. "You should be careful what you say." "The gods listen when they are dismissed." Arachne turned, holding a length of dyed thread between her fingers. "Let them listen." "I do. Not fear them." The old woman tilted her head. Would you claim to be better than Athena? There was a pause, long enough for the wind to push through the workshop window and knock over a basket of discarded wool ends. Yes, Arachne said softly, I would, when... Arachne looked back up. The old woman was gone. Not in the slow, shuffling way elders depart, but suddenly, as if she had never been there. No footsteps. No scent of earth and leaves. Just absence, that night. Arachne did not sleep, not out of fear but from inspiration. Her fingers itched for the loom. A tapestry was forming in her mind. One unlike anything she had dared weave before. For days, she worked without rest. Her neighbors watched in confusion and awe as candlelight flickered from her windows all through the night. She refused. Food, ignored the peddlers. Spoke to no one. Only the soft rhythms of her shuttle, click, slide, click, told them she still lived. And the tapestry grew. It was not a work of flattery. It did not show Athena standing victorious. It did not portray her battles, or wisdom, or patronage over wise kings. Instead, it depicted the failings of the gods. In one panel, she wove Zeus turning into a swan, luring Leda. In another, she crafted Poseidon chasing Demeter through the forest. Dionysus's drunken revelries filled the bottom corner, and even the great Athena was shown competing against Poseidon in her contest for Athens. A moment where the goddess's pride had nearly led to the city's ruin. It was bold, possibly even foolish, but it was beautiful. The wool shimmered not with gold, but with deep tones pulled from crushed walnut shells, flower dyes, and painstakingly blended ochres. The skin of the gods looked human, flawed, their eyes cold and distant. The tapestry pulsed with a strange kind of truth, one not often told at temple festivals. And so it was, on the fourth day of uninterrupted weaving, as the final stitch was tied, that the wind stilled outside Arachne's workshop. The air turned heavy, like the moments before a summer storm, and from that silence came a sound not of footsteps, but of divine presence. The old woman reappeared, only she was no longer hunched nor old. She stood tall, wrapped in a cloak of storm cloud. Gray, her hair woven with bronze and olive leaves. Her eyes glowed with knowing. This was not a traveler. This was not a customer. This was Athena. Arachne bowed slightly, but did not tremble. Her pride had grown deep roots. You summoned me, Athena said calmly. Not with prayers, but with arrogance. Arachne gestured toward the tapestry. I summoned you with truth. Athena approached the loom, eyes scanning every thread, every woven seam. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, to Arachne's surprise, the goddess nodded. It is flawless, Athena said. Your craftsmanship surpasses anything mortal, and indeed, even some divine. A flicker of hope rose in Arachne's chest. Was this praise? But Athena continued, You have forgotten one thing. Arachne met her gaze. What? Respect, the goddess replied, her tone cold as mountain stone. In Greek mythology, moments like these are rarely settled with forgiveness. Arachne did not beg. She did not cry. But what followed would become one of the most enduring, oddly poetic punishments in all of classical storytelling. But before that transformation, before the world of humans would forever change for Arachne, Athena made one final offer. Not out of mercy, but out of principle. Take back your words, the goddess said. Praise the gods for your gifts, and I will let you be. Arachne stood tall. Though her legs trembled, my skill is my own, she whispered. The gods, as it happens, have very little patience for mortals who do not tremble at thunder. But in this quiet moment, amid the last glow of candlelight, with the scent of wool and crushed berries in the air, one cannot help but ask, what would have happened had Arachne chosen to yield? What if she had bowed to the divine, praised Athena, and erased her tapestry? Would her story still be told? The final thread in the birth of the spider. When we left Arachne, she stood defiantly before Athena, goddess of wisdom and craft, patron of cities and warfare. Her tapestry, bold and irreverent, hung in the air like a challenge. In its threads, she had not only rivaled the divine, but judged it. With her skill, she had woven truth, not the mythological, temple-approved kind, but the kind that quietly bloomed behind olive groves and inside unspoken stories. Her hands, rough from labor, still clutched the loom's wooden frame. Her eyes, red with fatigue, did not blink, and Athena had given her a choice. Take back your words. Credit the gods. Unweave the offense, but Arachne refused. So the goddess responded not with a lightning bolt, nor with fire, but with transformation. Not as punishment alone, but as permanence. It began not with pain, but with a strange stillness. As the goddess stepped forward, she raised her hand not high, not with violence, but with divine precision. A touch, that's all it took. A soft touch on the forehead, like a mother silencing a child. And then Arachne began to change. Her skin paled, tightening across her bones. Her fingers, once calloused and swift, shrank and multiplied, splitting into 8. Her back arched unnaturally, bending under an invisible weight. Her hair fell in soft clumps, replaced by fine, bristly filaments. Her breath caught, then resumed in shorter, shallower bursts. In moments, the proud weaver was gone. In her place clung a small, dark creature, suspended in the center of her masterpiece. Legs trembling, body glistening faintly in the candlelight. A spider. Athena stepped back, observing her creation. Not just the tapestry, but the new form Arachne had taken. The goddess did not destroy the loom, nor the tapestry. She left them both, suspended in the quiet workshop, where curious villagers would later find only an empty room, a half-finished meal, and fine, thin threads that hung from every corner. Arachne's name passed into myth, of course. Her story, folded into scrolls, inked onto pottery, etched into whispered warnings told to young weavers. Not as a symbol of pride, but as a caution, a reminder of what happens when mortals forget their place. Or, more cynically, what happens when mortals dare to outshine their gods. But here's the quiet truth the myths do not say. Athena did not kill her. She let her live in a form built to weave. Arachne continued to spin, without warping thread, without dyes or looms. She spun instinctively, across barns and rafters, hidden in caves, shaded under olive trees. Her patterns, though now unseen by most, retained their ancient beauty. Delicate geometry, spirals of silk stronger than steel, tapestries no longer meant for human eyes, yet enduring in form and instinct. And the world changed little. Bread was still baked. Priests still spoke Athena's praises. Women still sat at looms, weaving with reverence, with care, and with more than a little fear. But every so often, when a web caught the light in a quiet corner of a room, when its fine lines shimmered like gold thread against dust and shadow, someone might pause, might wonder, and somewhere, deep in that instinctive part of human memory where myths and dreams intertwine, the faintest whisper of Arachne's defiance might be heard. That craft, real craft, does not always come from gods. Sometimes it is born in the quiet rhythm of a girl's tired hands, threading truth through wool in a candlelit room, far from Olympus. Arachne's story, in all its stillness and strangeness, is one of paradox. Her punishment was transformation, but it was also immortality. She became what she loved most, what she did best. Not by choice, but not entirely without purpose. And that leads us to the thought that lingers long after her myth ends. Was Arachne cursed or liberated? Is eternal weaving in silence truly punishment? Or is it, perhaps, a kind of divine mercy? Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, thank you for drifting through history with us tonight. We hope Arachne's quiet thread carried you gently toward rest. If you enjoyed this slow unraveling of ancient stories, please consider liking this video, sharing it with a fellow night owl, and subscribing to Quiet Boring Sleep for more calming tales from the forgotten corners of history. Sleep well. The past will still be here in the morning,